Welcome, everybody, to a special time, special day, special edition of Make It Make Sense. You know, nothing is normal right now, so we can't really just follow normal rules, normal schedules, normal calendars for when we come to you and get information. And my guest today is busy and in high demand and in the hot zone. And given yesterday's announcement from the new administration and from the Department of State that all foreign aid would be frozen from the United States for 90 days to everywhere except two places, two exceptions, two waivers, Israel and Egypt. So that means foreign aid to Ukraine. And we have gotten what I think are some clarifications, some updates about that. And we're just thankful you're here, but nobody can give us the information better than friend of the show, independent journalist, Detroit's own, living abroad in Kyiv, Terrell J. Starr. Welcome, Terrell.
Hey,
Hey!
how you doing? So next time I come on the show, the setup is gonna be slamming. I'm going through a renovation, so forgive me to kind of like the downward look. So for the day, yeah.
We don't care. I'm just frankly, I'm happy to be seeing you. I'm happy to be talking with you. I follow you places, so I do checks to make sure, like proof of life. I do proof of life checks,
Oh,
but
I was just in Brussels a few days ago. I was talking about independent media and disinformation in Ukraine. So I was there for a few days, and then the week before, I was shooting about 9 days straight a series called Black Ukraine. So starting in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be producing video on Black Diplomats Official. I'm relaunching my YouTube channel, and I'm focusing exclusively on the Black experience in Ukraine. So you all are going to be here, and I'm also going to be posting clips on my Instagram daily, and so you all are going to be seeing native-born Black people talking about what it's like to live in this country during the war. And you'll hear, actually, one of them will be my personal trainer. Her name is Helen. She's a Black woman and a professional bodybuilder, and so she's from Eastern.
I saw a few of your posts, and I actually, frankly, Terrell, was just happy to see that because I was like, to me, that represented some semblance of normalcy in some parts of the country, that you could be there and be able to engage in things that frankly you need for survival, but also you can't really do when bombs are dropping on top of your head. So maybe that's where we can start, because I know it's 11:40 p.m. there, right?
I'm
And
here for you. Anytime you ask me to come on, I'll come on. So if it was anybody else, I would say no, because I just finished a 16-hour train ride, which is the most uncomfortable ride I've ever had coming into this country. But you asked me, so I'll do it.
well,
So
I appreciate it, because I was looking at, as you said, I was looking at the announcements, but then I was looking at the misinformation, and I was just like, we need people who actually can give us firsthand information. I do want to clarify from yesterday till today. Yesterday we got the announcement. Well, actually, it was a leak from the State Department. The memo leaked saying that aid was going to be cut off except for to the two countries, for Israel and Egypt. And it said foreign aid. It didn't say military or humanitarian. It just said foreign aid. And then I think I sent you, Senator Leahy's office did some clarifying, because when the news broke out ahead of them, everybody started backtracking, except our new president, who was like, well, yeah, it should be cut off. And it was Zelensky's fault. He's no angel. He's no angel. He bears some responsibility. I'm like, last I checked, they got invaded, and it's a war against a sovereign state. But moving forward, then today, President Zelensky, in getting ready to meet with another president, said to the press that foreign aid, military aid from the United States has not stopped. And that is what his concern is. He's like, at least not yet. Thank God. And so I think that is where we really are. But that's just a symptom of what has happened for the past 5 days. huge announcement or leaked announcement, everything gets thrown against the wall. Everybody gets to freak out, as we should, but we still need to be rooted and grounded in facts. So, what's going on the ground, my friend?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. So right now, you're right about the fact that the military aid is still ongoing for one simple reason, because Congress approved it. And
Yeah.
so, you have this guy that comes in and says, I'm going to freeze this and freeze that. That may sound good to supporters or whomever, but in reality, you can't reverse these actions that are codified in the law through Congress. Like, you just can't do it. And so that's the thing. Now, what we are concerned about here is the funding that go to things like restoring the grids here. So, right now I'm looking outside my window. I'm in downtown Kyiv, and there are high rises. Now, it's been quiet on the most part, and you see that it's lighting here. I have electricity. But when the Russians really want to get into their business, they fire hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones at us, shutting down the electrical grid. And so we can go several hours without electricity. But that electricity is also for hospitals, right? That, for people, if you're, say you go and have a baby, and then the electricity is out because there's because there's an electricity outage. And so a lot of the foreign aid that Trump is talking about goes to stuff like this. Okay. And so another thing that you're thinking about is you have a program where Ukrainian refugees can resettle in the United States, United for Ukraine. That's something that a lot of my friends are freaking out about. Those type of programs are impacted from a Ukrainian standpoint. We don't, we're talking about Ukraine, but just thinking about it globally, you have HIV and AIDS initiatives, antiviral drugs, things of that nature that are going towards the continent, or you have anti-corruption foreign aid that goes to places, including Ukraine, right? That makes sure that the money that we do send here is used is used properly. That includes supporting local staff, local, local offices here, so that you don't have to bribe people. And one of the reasons why you have anti-corruption programs is that I believe the year was 1977, and I'll double check, but it's basically the late 1970s, where there's a law that states that Americans cannot bribe foreign officials. That was a thing. So when you're talking about foreign aid, it's this type of stuff. And the irony of Trump saying that, we need to kind of rid corruption, that where do you think the money is going? And so we need to distinguish what foreign aid means. That's a difference in how you break it down. That includes military aid. And so for Ukrainians right now, there is just first of all, there's a bit of I guess of a shock,
Yeah.
a shell shock
Yeah.
here about how he was elected in the first place. That's a whole nother conversation that they
Yeah.
have here. And I tell them, hey, as a black man, I get it. And what's really unique about being black here is that, they don't understand. We understand the culture, F around and find out. We understand, we try to tell y'all. And so when you have a lot of the Ukrainians who go to the United States, and they're just figuring out themselves in this new country, I let them all know that essentially, particularly the people in my group, you have a very critical choice, which is to integrate into this blob of whiteness, that will lead you astray, versus really being conscious and being understanding and being woke about what the hell is going on in this country, because you're not the type of white that you may think that you are. Okay, so
Wait,
you're pretty
wait,
much
Terrell, don't do it. Don't do it. It's on my list.
okay.
It's on my list.
Yeah, but anyway, that's general breakdown. So
But
here
tell
right now again.
but tell me before you, thank you. And there are people in the comments saying this is really helpful information. As people are joining, I do want to say, if you have any questions, we'll try to take them at the end. Use the question icon, because as things roll by, I'll lose it trying to scroll down. So if you can use the question icon, if you have a question for our expert independent journalist, Terrell J, Starr, then you can ask the question in the comments, and we will try to take like 5 minutes to do that at the end. But what I kind of want to know, like, because frankly, we had this election, and it's the Wild Wild West over here, and you're right to say people who are not from here don't understand. They're thinking logical things are going to happen. They're thinking you don't elect stupid twice. They're thinking, oh, it's a white supremacist. Black people won't vote for him. Mexican Americans, Cuban Americans, whoever won't vote for him. Like I said, I'm putting that down on the list. That's going to be our last topic because talking about whiteness, I feel like is a waste of time when I have something else to talk to you about. But what is what is the status of the war? Like I feel like we as Americans got as we can really focused inward on everything that was going on here domestically. And it seemed like the Ukrainian people were committed to fighting, were fighting, and that Russia at some point was gonna have to like give up. But that has not happened yet
Hmm.
either. So is the engagement now focused in particular areas? I mean, where,
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah,
talking about ground
correct.
engagement. Obviously, if they're doing air assault, it could be
Oh, yeah,
anywhere.
that's a great question. So yes, it's a stalemate at this point. So at the start of the war, you saw all these heroic stories about Kyiv standing strong. Something that Ukrainians surprised themselves about, realizing how great their military was and their defenses were. Right. First of all, this country is one of the biggest in Europe. It's a huge country, roughly the size of your home state of Texas, and the Russians never had enough people
Okay.
to occupy this country. That's just one fundamental fact. And so you can have all the air support that you want, but you literally need people on the ground to police and control it. They never sent enough people. That let's just start there.
Yeah.
And they never had enough people, and they still don't have enough people to fully occupy this country. That's a very important thing.
Yeah.
Let's just fast forward into what your question about now. And so there are key cities that are located in the east and south of Ukraine right now that that Russians are trying to that are trying to claim, and many of these cities are key logistical hubs where
Logistical because they're the gateway to Europe.
no, that gateway a good question. That's not necessarily the gateway to Europe, but logistic, like military logistics, right? Because you need to send for as many tanks that you send into battle, you need the equipment to repair them, right? Spare parts or food, routes through which soldiers, like a fresh allotment of soldiers can go through, that type of thing. And so or like just think about railroads, right? Just think about your infrastructure, railroads, things to get through, and those types of things, right? And so if you have these key cities that are captured by Russia, then that severely limits Ukraine's ability to replenish its already exhausted troops in certain areas in the eastern southern parts of Ukraine. So that's the first thing. It's at a stalemate, and so it's one of the reasons why Zelensky called for the incursion or pretty much the occupation of certain parts of the Kursk region in Russia right now. And so the idea is to siphon the number of troops that would otherwise go into these key checkpoints in Ukraine, therefore capturing these cities, because too many of those soldiers have to go and defend their own homeland, right? And so the Ukrainians have tens of thousands of their soldiers in Russia right now for the sole purpose, and part of that strategy is to keep these cities that are targets to be captured keep them in Ukrainian control. And
Yeah.
so the stalemate exists for one simple reason: not enough military hardware from the West. And it's not only the United States; it's also the rest of Europe. It hasn't been getting to Ukraine long enough. Because here's the main thing, and no one has ever said this, so I'm going to say it to you for your show just to make it make sense and make it simple, right? The issue is that the United States and Europe are not in wartime economies. Russia is. And if you're in a wartime economy, i.e., Russia, i.e., North Korea, because you're an autocracy and you can do whatever the hell you want and you don't have to listen to your people, you're definitely going to be better poised to finance your war efforts in ways that the United States can't. Let's just give you one concrete example: the 155 millimeter rounds. Right, this is an artillery war, and so basically what Russia does particularly is, they're using the same methods here in Ukraine that they used in the first and second wars in Chechnya, which is just bombing the hell out of things until people submit. So that's what the Russians do. And so you go through this country like I have, and you just see a whole bunch of cities that are utterly destroyed, and they do that for the sole purpose of breaking the will of the people, which has not come close to happening here yet. And we can get into the why behind that. But right now, you have year 1, year 2, year 3. The last time that Ukraine had a successful counteroffensive was in the Kharkiv region, which is in the east. It's about a 7 hours drive from here, from Kyiv, where I'm sitting right now. And so there are certain parts of the Kharkiv region that the Russians have taken over. Not all of it, but much of it. And so another problem that you have is that Russia is a colonized country, and I'll talk about that. It's a colonized country of roughly 140 some million people compared to a country of pre-war about 45 million. And so Ukraine on its own is not designed to man an army on its own to fight against a Russia of country of its size. And I
Now,
talk
tell
about
me this, because the last time I I don't, well, that might not be the last time that we talked to you, but at least in the last 2 times, you remember you were like in a bunker somewhere, and
mhm.
and you, I think we focused that conversation on people's efforts to leave
Yeah, right.
and the preferences that were enabling some to be able to
Oh
get
yeah,
out,
oh yeah, yeah,
because at that
yeah,
point
yeah.
it was women, children, and
Right. Mm-hmm.
like Americans
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
who
yeah,
were
yeah.
able to exit. What I'm wondering is, of the people who were doing kind of like that mass exodus, have many returned?
Yes, and the reason why, yes, so a lot of people who are leaving or fleeing Ukraine, right, as refugees into Europe, they're returning because Europe is getting tired of them. Just to be blunt about it. And so, I know friends personally who went to Poland, who went elsewhere, and depending on the state, they, sometimes the state will say, okay, for, as of January of 2014 or March or of 2025, we can no longer support housing for Ukrainian citizens. And so a lot of these people, you have to remember, when they are going into Europe, they lost everything.
Yeah.
They may have a home, they may have a business. I know people who have businesses and their funding was just depleted. And so you were asking these people to go to a new country where they don't know the language, the culture, or know anyone, to start over again.
Yeah.
And some people can't do that. And so they're forced to, I mean, who could? Okay. So any human being. So they're forced to come back into this country that they now realize it can protect itself. But if you're in the East, where a lot of people are from and it's currently under occupation, then most people don't want to go back to that, because of the fact that they are going to be subject to Russian rule and subject to Russian abuse. This past week, for example, I know people who are in occupied territories, and they told me about the fact that they were abused physically, all types of abuse they experienced in occupation in Russia. And so, who wants to go back to that? So now, then you have to go back into the country that's not occupied, and now, as opposed to being a refugee, you're an IDP, an internally displaced person. So you have to choose between being a refugee in Europe or an IDP in your own country.
Homeless.
Neither is right. So neither is particularly easy.
home
Many people,
home without a home, or
right.
away and completely outside of your country without any rights. What's the media presence like there now? I know that you are an independent journalist, and I'm not going to let you get off with us without telling us how we can
Oh
support
yeah,
you,
yeah,
but
yeah.
we're not getting, obviously, anything near the kind of information that we were getting the first months, year of this conflict. Who do you see over there, and what's getting reported?
Well, that's a good question. So right now, and it's interesting you bring that up. I just came from a colleague's place. where he was, he's an independent journalist. He has a newsletter that's on Substack, and I'm going to plug mine too, Black Diplomats Official, where I'm relaunching next week. And my art, and my first article is going to be just a sneak peek for you all. Trump revoked Ukrainians' white privilege. So that's going to be one of my articles in the relaunch. But you see it right now. There's a lot of independent journalists mixed in with a lot of the traditional media. You don't see them as much anymore because, the big question was, can Ukraine hold? And so we saw them holding. And so now that the big story of can Ukraine hold has been generally answered, or people think that it's been answered, then the interest and the intrigue is not there anymore. So what it's really a challenge for us to do is to come up with new storylines about why people are here and what they're doing right now. So one of the things that I'm doing, just take for example my trainer.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at this sister, you look at her, you see her in Washington D.C. or Harlem or wherever, you just think she's old. You think that's an old girl from around the way. But her father is from Mali. Her mother is in Luhansk, and she's been under Russian occupation since the start of the war. And she says that she can't even call her mother anymore.
Yeah.
So she doesn't even know what happened to her. So
Mm-hmm.
we were at the gym and we were shooting our video for this series that I'm going to do. And she's going about her life. She has clients and everything. But not only can she not talk to her mother, but she had two brothers who were tortured by Russians when the Russians invaded in 2014. And so one of them was killed in combat fighting Russians, and then the other one has psychological issues as a result of his combat. So basically, this woman that you see, her black and all of her blackness that may not crack for decades, she has all of these personal issues with her. And so I'm going to share her story as a new perspective to understand this country and this people, because you see a black person say, "Oh, I didn't know she existed." Well, very much she does, right? Another black woman who's from Donetsk, which is another a big city in the east, and so she is, and she told me that one of the things that she feared during the Russian occupation, even back in 2014 when they first invaded, was that she feared the racism from Russia that she would experience. And so that forced her to flee, and then her home, as it was, her country is invaded again for a second time. So you have all these black people who have all these layers of oppression that they're navigating in this wartime environment that we don't even hear about. But if you're a mainstream media person that's coming from, name the mainstream outlet, how many of them are coming to look for black people? So that's what I'm doing, and it's a new way to kind of revigorate an interest in this war. And again, if you want to get a part of that, Black Diplomats Official as my Substack, and Black
I
Diplomats Official
have it
on.
pinned.
Yeah. So you can start hearing those stories in the next week.
Yeah. Okay, so I just kind of have one more area because obviously we've had this election. You and I, we've talked in the past on online, offline. Um, White supremacists are going to do what they're going to do. They're about an agenda, and it's not that you or I tried to tell people. We told people,
Yeah.
but the thing that I realize is we didn't just tell people. They told people. Like, there was no hide the ball about the agenda or the planned rollout or the things that would be done. Like, um it was all very available through writings, through Project 25,
Their
through
own
things
words, their mouths.
right. No,
Right.
no need to make it up, right? No need to exaggerate. That was all out there. But many are learning what white really is to them, who
Yes.
thought that they would be swept in the blanket of white folk protection, and are finding out that they are not in that little mini circle of hate they are on the outside of it. They are on the part that goes out this way. And I posted just a couple of hours ago a member of Congress who's begging the State Department, begging Homeland Security,
Yeah,
begging President Trump
yeah.
to not take out what Biden did. That's what she's saying. What Biden did.
She was talking about the
Don't
Cubans.
take
I saw that one. I saw that
don't
was the
take his
Cubans
screw ups
talking about.
out
Yeah.
on the Cubans,
And she was over
on the
there
Nicaraguans,
campaigning with these fools. I
on
saw. I know
on
exactly
the
who she is.
Guatemalan. She said, "Leave Cuba alone. Leave Nicaragua alone. Leave Guatemala alone." She mentioned the Haitians who were covered by the same bill. I wonder why. Okay, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
just my one example. And you have talked previously about people of Ukraine looking to be and thinking they are white, and we are at a find out moment of inflection for Ukrainians as well.
Oh, absolutely. And so, look, I've been traveling to this part of the world since 2003 when I first was accepted in the Peace Corps. And, it's interesting being a Black person of conscience in this part of the world and in these spaces, because you can just imagine how few Black Americans, especially, are specializing in Russian and Eastern European politics, etc. And particularly if you bring your dignity with you, okay? And that's and we know what that means. That's a very important distinction, okay? And so what that means is you have to be the person in the room to tell them that, I experienced this country a lot differently than you, and as much in the democracy that you're talking about is the one that my parents did not experience until the late 1960s. And that democracy and freedom and justice that you talk about from the founding fathers, we were not written into that. And for the 250 years this country has existed, Black folk have had those freedoms for roughly a quarter of it. Yeah. So let's just start there, yeah. Right? Let's just start there. But as simple and direct and as clear as that is to us, when I talk to a lot of Ukrainian audiences, it's new information for them, because again, they have white people who are very well meaning, but because they don't have that experience, personal experience, they don't lead with that because it's not considered like a hard political science, even though if you don't understand race, yep, you don't know anything about America. That's that's another part of the conversation we need to have. But, my conversations with Ukrainians has always, I always bring up Mike Johnson and the reason why he held up their military aid to Ukraine. And that's a very simple reason. And I go back to a quote from The Wire, where the deputy police chief, the white dude, was thinking that he's going to be in line to take over as chief of police of Baltimore. And one guy looked at him and said, "Are you kidding me? You ain't one of the natives." And so the Ukrainians, as it pertains to American whiteness, they ain't one of the natives. And so and the simple thing is this: when you listen to the Mike Johnsons and the J.D. Vances of the world, when they say that they are taking money from America to keep America safe, what they're saying is that these American white people who feel like their whiteness is being devalued, who feel like they're going to be harmed by these quote unquote herds coming from Mexico, and these Haitians who are eating dogs and cats, those are the people that they need to be protected from. Their daughters need to be protected from. Yep. And so as opposed to all this money that
I'm still listening, keep talking.
Yeah, that goes to Ukraine, we need to put that money down on the border. Because here's the reality of it, Monique. We all know that people who are coming into the country are not leading up to crime. They're not hiking up crimes. We know the data. We know that's not true. But from a campaigning standpoint, it's very effective, because what happens is that you blame the other. Now, the other traditionally has been Black folk. It has been Mexicans. It has been people of color. The other has not been Ukrainians. And so Ukraine, you've heard that name come up over and over and over and over again, because why? Ukraine is the international boogeyman, like Chicago is domestically, essentially. And
you're gonna make me scream, Terrell. I don't know if I want to cry, I want to scream, I want to run. But before I do any of those things, I want to say for people, I see you buying badges. Thank you. I think I see you commending Terrell's expertise. I saw Karen put some hearts on the screen when you mentioned the Peace Corps. But I mean, we've got a Fulbright here. We got Peace Corps
Yeah.
here. We've got like, you know, I think sometimes people don't understand the level of brilliance, not just in domestic affairs, but in international ones that are in our own community. I saw Dr. Nola Hayes is on here. I know that's your friend.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She's saying hi, Dr. Nola, and I will get to, if we have time, a couple of things. Stick that in the question icon Nola, and we're gonna come right to it. But I just got like 10 more minutes. I want to talk about two things because you said something the first time I felt like I wanted to bust out crying, about 5 minutes ago, when you said the reason why Russia can do what it's doing, and not have issues with sustaining it the way that Ukraine does is because you all are being supported by United States and Europe, who are not in wartime economies, and the difference that wartime economy makes. And the reason why that brought tears to my eyes is because we in the United States, I just saw my girl Tamika Mallory post something just like an hour ago, talking to people about how every time somebody here in the United States calls for a boycott, whether it's Target or Amazon or whomever, people immediately come up with a whole bunch of reasons why it can't be done or should not be done. And she said, you're going to have to run out of reasons sooner or later. And what has been going over and over in my head for the past 5 days has really been, we are in 2025 comfort, and now we've got like 1965 civil rights,
Mm.
and the comfort is gonna have to go by the wayside if we want to get any of those rights back. And I don't think that the dots of the this means war, I don't think those dots have connected at all, not just in our mentality, but how we choose to spend our money, what we choose to do with our time, and so I believe that the globe now is going to have to make some decisions, not just our country, about who we want to be, but the globe. And your comments about natives,
Mhm.
people, like for me to say you get it and I get it, frankly, Terrell, it's a lot of people who I thought would get it, who in the past year, when we were choosing whether we were going to elect this man or not, it didn't seem like they really got it. I mean, and they work in civil rights organizations, and they are advocates, and they are a part of our founders of movements. And I mean, and I had people tell me directly, it's not going to be as bad as that, Mo. And I'm like, the fuck it ain't. You are crazy.
They don't
Like,
understand.
I don't know what's going
I mean,
on.
what do you mean it doesn't? That doesn't make sense to me because it's already that bad, right?
It's our comfort level. It's our comfort level. As we were coming up to this election and what it would mean for that man to be in the office again, and what they would roll out, and the consolidating of support, and the consolidating of the billionaires and the tech industry and social media, all of these things that we saw happening, I believe that our level of comfort has had us fooled. In the Bible, it talks about being at ease in Zion, and I lots of
I
times,
know that. I know that quote.
and
I
and
know
I
that quote. But let me give you an
I talk
example.
lots of time, like you skipping through daisies and his bombs coming down,
Let
baby.
me give you a
Like I don't.
concrete example of why, right? So, for example, one of the challenges. So, being in a country like Ukraine, which is just celebrating little over 30 years of independence, right? What Americans don't understand is that Trump ran a kleptocratic White House.
Yeah.
He is a one. So let me explain what that means. So what it means is that you are taking the resources of the state and pretty much using it as your own ATM. Essentially, that's what you're doing, right? And so it's no different than what Putin's done. Russia is a kleptocracy. Trump wants to turn this country into a kleptocracy. Fortunately, we have so many levers of government and powers, and that it makes it difficult. But what he's done through the
Do
courts at the
we? Do we though, Terrell? Do we?
I
Because
was going to break down
the
why. I'm going to break.
hearings, the nominee for director of the OMB, Russell Vogt, the one thing that they kept questioning him about is the impoundment laws, because what they believe, though it is illegal, what they believe is that Congress can
Mhm.
decide to send money to Ukraine and say send 2 billion, and
Mhm.
that they can send 250 million and take the rest and put it wherever they
Well,
want
they
it to
can't.
go.
Well, they can't do that. That's illegal. They can't.
Except
They can't.
for they can, and they did, and that's why he got impeached the first time.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. That's true. That's true. Now, here's the thing. I think what happens with people is that they have an experience on their day-to-day life. So, what does that mean? That means having to constantly pay a police officer a bribe when you have a speeding ticket,
Yeah.
right? Because I would say about 15 years ago, we've had that experience here. Ukraine has really elevated and moved up beyond those years on the most part. But basically, a country that understands what it means that if you want to get something fixed in your building, going to a city official
You
and
got to
giving
pay.
them $30,
Yep.
right? Unless you experience that on a constant basis, you're not going to appreciate it. People need something visceral. It's like going to the emergency room as opposed to going to have your every 3 or 6 month checkup, right? And
Yeah.
so one of the things that Trump understands really well is that he gives this kind of veneer progress based on tapping into people's fears and telling them what they want to hear. But and then he's really marketed on the fact that so many people distrust the quote unquote liberal media, even though we know it's not nearly liberal as we think it is, because people genuinely don't know things. People don't generally know things, right? So we take for granted that our jobs and our various capacities train us to understand information and to be discerning about things, even if we don't like it. One of the things about you, Monique, is that you respect the law. You don't respect people's feelings, right? The law says this, the law says that. I understand that there is a court of public opinion, but the law says this.
And
Even
I
though we
get, I'm the target. I just had it happen 5 days ago. Don asked me to come on and talk about something. I don't even want to say what I went on and talked
yeah,
about, but I told him, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do it, but that what I'm about to say is not what anybody wants to hear. But I think we at least have to have this starting point, because I've been seeing, to your point, people saying day after day, executive orders aren't law, executive orders
they
don't
but
mean anything,
they
don't worry
are
about
they
what's
are
happening
they
with
are
executive
they
orders.
are
And I had to come in and say executive orders are lawful. Let me say that
correct,
first of all.
correct,
And
correct. Yes,
the only way they end up challenged, no, they're not as strong as legislation passed by Congress. But if you own Congress and you own the Supreme Court, then
correct.
yes, that damn executive order is law.
But the problem, but again, the other issue is that Americans, we really have taken for granted what it has taken to establish a republic, right? And so that's the reason why so many people look to America as this bastion, because they actually are responding to what they think America is. But we both know that when you really get inside the guts of it, it's like the machinery of it is is very fragile,
It's
right? That
tender.
that
It's
is
tender.
very tender. It's very tender. It's very fragile. And so we also have to keep in mind that when you think about, I think about there is a Supreme Court ruling in 2011. I can't think of it. We'll probably come up with it, but essentially what it does, it basically it took away the power of the Justice Department to regulate to regulate how states change their electoral laws, right? So these very small, finite details, these major cases, are kind of go over people's heads. But that's the reason why in Georgia you can pass state laws that say, well, if you're in line, certain groups can't pass water out
Well,
to
and
you,
it
right?
was part of the combined cluster of Supreme Court decisions that undid, basically gutted the Voting Rights Act. And so there are some powers that have always belonged to the states with respect to the vote. And then there were regulations that controlled based on a state's
Correct.
behavior
Correct.
whether they had the right to do that or not. And so we where we are now is and that's why I said we're in 1965 early. We are pre civil
Correct.
rights of 60, which is
It's
why
not
one of the
68.
executive orders that came out this week went back and revoked an executive order of 1965. I
Correct.
mean, they're trying to tell you where the golden age really is. They're making it very plain what they view to be the best era, and we didn't have anything in that time period. Okay, so
Can I ask
so
something like 30, like 20
go,
seconds? You know, when you
go
think
ahead.
about,
No, you got all the time in the
well,
world.
listen, Germany, for example, you have Alternative for Deutschland, right? And they're making waves. Like these far right parties in Europe are making waves, right? You have Le Pen's party,
Yeah.
uh, that's in France, and they're always going to, these far right parties are taking age, and they're doing very similar things in Europe. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that one of the reasons why Trump is so popular with these parties in Europe, many of whom you can find some linkage to Russian money. I mean, this is verifiable fact, is that one thing that they understand that they have together as one is whiteness. Global white supremacy is a very global entity, and the power of kleptocracy is that you can undermine democracy, and because what we're really talking about is that Trump doesn't want democracy. This current Republican Party does not want democracy, and kleptocracies can't function in democracies. And so, why do these people literally hail Trump's victory, across Europe in the Western, in these right-wing leaning parties? They all have the same talking points, which is anti-immigrant. And I find it interesting that Orban does it, because there was a time when they were not the whites that they aspired, that they thought that they were, and they were considered to be the Eastern European whores going into Western Europe. That's a whole, again, another conversation. But yeah, you have
And we
all these.
need to be having these conversations, Terrell. As long as you're willing to have them, we'll keep
Uh,
you coming
yeah,
back to
so
have them.
yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah, and so basically, I'm bringing this up because I just think that all of us as Americans who care about our country, we really have to appreciate how fragile our democracy is. And I'm telling you, it is very, very, very fragile. And ultimately, what we're going, what's going on in Russia, we can become an autocracy like Russia is. People think that we're beyond it, but we are not. Okay? When you think about the ways in which protesters are targeted, people who are, DEI, the things that are supposed to, when you think about what makes America this great experiment, that people, of all the countries in the world where black people can have some type of shot, you know, these attacks on diversity programs are really a reaction to, we feel like our whiteness is being attacked. And so until we realize that this battle is really about the state of whether or not we could be a republic and what that means for us on the individual level, it's going to hit us when it's too late. And then we're going to be fighting for our freedoms and justice again, because you're right, we're very much in the 1965 period. We're at a cusp, and it really takes an awakening of our people to get that. But what also is happening with the Haitians eating dogs and cats, you have a number of black people, unfortunately, who are falling for this xenophobia, because again, xenophobia does not care about skin color. It cares about the other,
Yeah.
right? And the other, the person who is foreign born. But in reality, we don't realize that xenophobia eventually turns on us. Just like the indifference that I talk to a lot of Ukrainians about. You could say whatever you want about black people, about Latino people. These aren't affecting you. But once again, xenophobia doesn't care about you, and you think that your color will protect you, and it does not. That is the power of xenophobia. And so until we all come together and realize that it doesn't, at the end of the day, impact, it doesn't help any of us, then we're all going to be losing.
And that's the same for Black people in the United States who think that tougher immigration laws will not ultimately land on their doorstep. Immigration laws, ICE raids, all of those things end up being pretext to go out and ultimately not just deport people who are here illegally, but to imprison people who are here legally. I have seen it over and over again. I tell people all the time, they ask me what to do. I say, carry your papers.
Oh,
What you
listen,
look what you look like? What you look like? Carry your papers, because if you can't immediately show them, they will hold you and ask questions later. They will run a search on you trying to find a warrant that has nothing to do with you being here illegal. They will put you in jail, which has already happened. They will hold people who are here legally, born here veterans, and hold them. But there were people in the questions. I mean, then I'm going to answer a couple. But people were asking, are we talking about Dobbs? People were, and someone was saying, I don't know, it was Dr. Noel, or someone was saying it was gutted by legislation. Actually, no. Here's the thing. The courts gutted it and said this no longer applies. What had happened, what had been happening every other term period, was that the legislature would then re-up it. That's why we had to have a whole new John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which is not even
yeah,
yet
right,
a
exactly.
thing,
Yeah, yeah.
because what we were supposed to do is look at the new data and do what had been bipartisan, which had been like nobody against it until the Trump era. And so we had courts to say this no longer applies as written, send it back to the legislature, fix it, and they wouldn't, and they won't, and they haven't. And so in the question marks, we have Karen asking, how realistic is it that Russia will take over Ukraine and invade Europe? Like, what's going on with their mission?
That's a good, okay. That's a good question. I don't see Ukraine completely taking. I don't see Russia completely taking over Ukraine because they don't have enough manpower to do it. So Russia, according to some estimates, they've lost roughly about 800,000 soldiers. And what does that number mean? Lost, or casualties. Casualties include dead. It includes missing in action. It includes injured. It includes people who are people who desert.
I was
Right.
about to
It
say it
includes
includes AWOL, because a lot of people said
AWOL.
to hell with this.
Yeah, AWOL. It includes AWOL people, right? And so roughly it's difficult to determine the number of dead, but basically these are people who in many instances can't return to fight, which is a lot of people. And so Ukraine itself is too big of a country for them to fully occupy. And so I don't see that happening. What I do see is them holding the territory that they do have. Another question about invading Europe, I don't really I do feel like it's not going to be a land attack. What Russia does is they operate in a very asymmetrical type of warfare, and that may be hybrid, that may be hacking, because Russia does not have the capability to defeat NATO. It's just virtually impossible. And I'll bring
But
up
does
another
that
point.
mean that they won't even start or try it?
They
Because
won't.
obviously, a lot of people have concern that if we end up not supporting Ukraine militarily
Yeah,
and we lose those threshold areas, that then we're going to end up with boots on the ground
that's.
as members of NATO.
I think okay. I think that's a real possibility for one simple reason. And this is the question that we all need to ask ourselves. Again, no one is posing these questions to people, so I'm going to do it for us. So, one, America, for whether you like it or not, is a part of an alliance. If you have a country as big as America, for good or for better or for worse, empire, blah, 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 in order for this whole thing to work, we need alliances. And so America is the biggest member of NATO. Ukraine is bordered by 4 NATO countries. That is Hungary, that is Poland, that is Romania and Slovakia. Okay, it is not sustainable for a NATO alliance to have this type of political and economic and military instability on their borders. It simply is not, and it has to
Mhm.
end one way or the other, to the point where if it continues and these other countries for one reason or another feel threatened, they, and this is a wild shot, it doesn't mean that these countries can't take actions independently, even though that they're a part of an alliance, right? And what that means is that you have these Eastern European countries, let's say namely Poland and Romania, that have a very different cultural history, particularly one of occupation with Russia, than the Western European countries do. So there's a conflict or a clash between these Eastern European countries and these Western European countries that are pretty much buffered from Russia. And so there's more of a fear in the eastern part, particularly in the Baltic states, than there are in, say, in France or Brussels or Belgium or, say, England. And so there's definitely a possibility, and that's the reason why the best move that would have been was to give Ukraine everything they needed so they can fight this war themselves. And they do have the capacity and the ability to do it, but the fear was that we don't want this to, the Biden administration, which I think was a mistake, was that we fear that this will escalate to a nuclear war. Listen, Putin is not going to bomb a country that he sends his kids to live in. I mean, a continent that he sends his kids to live in. His children live in Europe. The wealthiest oligarchs in Russia, they all live in Europe. Okay? And so this idea that they're going to nuke their own economic interests, it just doesn't practically make any sense to me. And the idea that Russia would threaten nuclear countries that can return their own nuclear arsenals against them, Putin doesn't want to die. All right. The bottom line is, how much is Ukraine worth to Russia versus the West? And Putin at this point has shown that it's more to him for psychological and colonial reasons than it is to the rest of Europe. And that's the question that Europe has to ask itself.
He has endless resources to spend on it also. Like it's worth to him what it's worth to him, and anybody can get hurt in the process. Okay, last question from CTate_4 Insurance. How do Ukrainians view Trump?
They think that he's cuckoo. I mean, so here's the thing. I'll give you the obvious one, which they think that he's nutty, but they find him to be a buffoon. But the real conversations that I've had with people is, why is it that Americans chose him? That's the conversation that people ask me. I'll never forget. I was interviewing an MP, a member of parliament, a few years, during Trump's first term. I've spoken to plenty of people since, but of all the times I've spoken about Trump, this story sticks out to me. So, we're off record and everything, and so I'm sitting down with these members of parliament, and they show me a story. They said, "Terrell, did you see this?" And he said something stupid as usual, and they looked at me and they said, "How? How?" I didn't have the mental bandwidth to explain to him the how, because that conversation would have gone into whiteness in America and all these things that I just honestly didn't feel like doing. But in this past election, there's a gentleman that I talked to in the foreign ministry. We sit down, let's say once a month, and we talk. I talk to him about the states. He talks about Ukraine. And I do talk to him a lot about American culture. And I talk to him about whiteness. I talk to him how they view Ukraine. And that's really how you have to get to the heart of it. But many of them, because they're not used to learning about America in that way, it doesn't register with them. Because I could give them the hard-boiled response that Trump is doing this because of X, Y, and Z. And we all know that it's a waste of time. We know why. But what's tough about it is that I'm the only person that's telling them that. And I'm not saying that it's because I'm super special, I'm the exception or whatever. I'm saying it because I'm literally the only Black person that many of these people get to talk to in a meaningful way, right? In a meaningful way. I'm not talking about you go to work and you see this guy as a colleague and then they go home. These are people who I talk to who have some type of authority, right? They're diplomats or whatever, and I speak to them. They're not used to talking to Black people who are honest with them or who are not representing a government and can tell them the truth. Because many of them, they are going to Washington, D.C., they work at embassies or they may work at the UN, and they work in this very isolated
speak on behalf of the official interests of the United States government.
But more specifically, I'm talking about the Ukrainians that go abroad. And so they go
I'm saying They
America.
talk to people who have to toe the party line.
Right. But
Yeah.
also they don't go outside of their white circles. For
Mm.
one, I'm the first black person at my university, the first and the only one at the University of Illinois that graduated with a master's degree in Russian and Eastern European politics. There are a number of these institutes around the country where it's just one graduate, right, from the graduate program.
Mm.
And so think about it. We are the one, and I know them all, most of them. And so we are the ones that have to go out. Yeah, in Georgetown too. Of course, no, yep, definitely Georgetown. There's one of them, right? Because I spoke there. And so we are the ones who have to do this talking about America. And it's quite frankly, it's tiresome because you don't have other people who are reinforcing it. And so they don't really they genuinely are curious because they don't understand America, because they don't understand race. And because people don't talk to them about race because they feel like that's black people's problem or other people's problem. They don't realize how, like I gave you that example with Mike Johnson, and how they pretty much said in their in their policy and their talking points throughout this campaign that they are not one of the natives, right? They learned then, right, the hard way. But if you don't have this reinforced, then they're not going to learn. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm in the final stages of getting a Fulbright grant to go to Germany, and so basically one of the parts of that Fulbright that scholar grant is that I'll be teaching courses about race and media and Ukraine, right? Bringing all three together. And so then I will have the opportunity to talk to students and they can ask me questions for an extended period of time about how American whiteness can seep into their foreign policy in ways that they never thought, because they thought it was exclusive for us. But as you know, racism is a virus and it destroys everybody,
Well,
right?
and
You know,
people who don't understand why the push has been for the past several years leading up to this administration and the walking out of Project 2025, getting rid of the history was an integral part, like taking the books that would teach the history of segregation, of slavery, of supremacy, of racism, raising people who have never heard it, so therefore cannot understand it, is a critical part of it. And I'm glad you're doing what you're doing because, and I
but you know
was
what,
just,
Monique, I'm so sorry. I have to
go
add something
ahead.
to that. But listen, you know what's the biggest irony of this is that in Ukraine, Russia is doing the same thing in occupied territories.
Yeah.
So so basically there are a group of people here, Crimean Tatars, right? And so they are pretty much based in they're in Crimea. And what the Russians have done there, they've stripped Tatar language, stripped, any history of Crimean Tatar history. And these are predominantly Muslim speaking, Muslim peoples. And so they go to these territories, do it's the similar white supremacist playbook, same thing, but they're doing that to them. They're also doing it to Ukrainians. And so in these occupied territories, you can't speak Ukrainian. And Putin says you have no history. Ukraine does not exist.
Yeah.
And so he straight up says this over and over again. You go to Russian state TV, it might as well be an Americanized version of Fox News, just
Mm.
as vile, just as worse. There is a term that Russians describe Ukrainians in, and it starts with a "h," right? And it's pretty much describes Ukrainians as, let's just say, white trash, essentially, right?
Mhm.
But it's a very offensive word to describe Ukrainians. And you go across Russian state TV, you hear it all the time.
Mhm.
So there is a way in which there is a Russianized form of ethnic discrimination against Ukrainians who are white, right? But the Russians are at the top of that line. And so what you're talking about, when you talk about this erasure of history, Putin is doing the same thing, which goes back to my central point that one of the things that these far-right extremists across Europe and Trump have in common is that they are preserving their whiteness and they have this alliance together. And the thing about it is that we need the whole crew, right? I
Yeah.
spend so much time talking to Ukrainians, talking to Asians, whomever. This white supremacist beast, the best of all of our communities have to come together to defeat it. We can't do it individually. That's why I'm so hard on all groups of people. if you're from Eastern Europe, you got to get over your racism, because at the end of the day, it's gonna screw you too. And
Right.
some
Come
people
on
have
in.
because
Come on in.
you know,
You know that
and,
old song, the grandma singing, "Come on in the room." We are all, it's it's the same room, but I'm more than that. I'm really appreciative for people who have, as my grandmother would have said, young legs to run like you, Terrell, because there is a level of exhaustion that I have been trying not to acknowledge, from what's going
it
on
ain't easy.
with my folks over here. And because when it comes down to having to say, and in the beginning there was slavery, people similarly situated to us, but really like my kind of age range and beyond,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Gen
yeah.
Xers and the boomers,
Mm.
where we're like, damn it, you mean you want me to explain again?
Yes, yeah.
Like how we got here and why it all matters. And I know that it's getting lost because, and this is one example, and then I for real have to go. I looked at on Instagram, there was a post that people were sharing, and it was like from a professional Black woman who thought that what she was posting was sassy and clever, and a lot of people thought so too. And the words on the page said, "Hey Rebecca, yes ma'am, every generation must be taught." um, Her words were, in essence, what does it matter if there's no DEI? They can get rid of all the DEI they want to, because Black women have the most education in America anyway. And I was like, y'all think this is cute,
Right,
but
right,
it really
right.
is cute by half. And it it revealed a complete lack of understanding of the fact that, sure, we got the most businesses and entrepreneurship, sure, we got the most education, and what
And no
would that
investment.
even matter if it's the racism that
Right,
keeps the hiring from happening?
right.
And it's the racism now with no affirmative action that keeps the education from happening. It's the racism that keeps people from poor communities from having Head Start and getting the opportunities. It's the
Mm-hmm.
racism that says no matter how smart you are, there's no SES level of service for you anymore. And it's the racism that says you can have all the businesses you want, but you're not going to be able to get any funding. It's the supremacy of it that keeps you a Harvard educated broke person,
Yeah,
because
that's the thing.
you have no place to be in your entrepreneurship, in your educational environment, in your government, in your corporation. There's nothing for you if they stop the advancement. The organization was called the National Advancement, right? National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. It wasn't ever about the, if I only had a brain. That's not what, and see, I
Yeah,
get too pissed off, which is why I'm saying, if I have to start from scratch, it's gonna be a whole bunch of motherfuckers start coming out my mouth. Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
can't do it the right way. I'm working on myself. I'm failing at the moment, but I am working on myself. But when I look at youngsters such as you who are willing to go from in the beginning and with a smile, and you don't even get, like, I feel like I'm about to lose my silk press, like I'm sweating, and 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 we need, and that's why I wanted you on here, that's why I support you, and I'm like, talk baby, talk, show all them brains, tell all the things, teach all the people, because
My
auntie is
pastor puts
tired.
hands on me too.
I don't forsake my auntie status. Sometimes I'm just like, what she just say? Like, what that mean? But okay, tell us where we can find you. Give your parting words. I'm going to put in here Black
Yeah,
Diplomats official.
so yeah, absolutely. I'm Black Diplomats official on YouTube and Substack. I am relaunching both of those verticals. So if you go to your YouTube channels and type in Black Diplomats official, you will find my page there. You will also go to Substack Black Diplomats official. You will find me there as well. And so I am going to start launching my Black in Ukraine series, where you'll learn about the stories of Black folk in Ukraine. And so also the Substack, I'm going to have similar conversations like we're having, but in written form. And at the end
So
of the
when is
day,
it rolling out? Like, because I don't want people going and they're like, there's nobody here.
yeah.
Can
So
they
no,
sign up
so
now?
yeah, you can absolutely sign up right now.
And
And
they can
so right
join
there,
the channel. They can subscribe to the channel
and
now.
you can subscribe to the
Okay.
channel, and they're also, and then you can subscribe right now, but then in the next few days there are going to be links to where you can get the subscriptions and everything, because we're going to sort that out, and we're in the process of kind of reworking things. But
And
you
your
can go right, you can go,
website is what it's
it's
terrelljstarr.com. Is
Terrell.
that right?
My website is terrelljstar.com, and
Okay.
I also have do speaking engagements where I focus on the intersection of race and foreign affairs. But most importantly, I create a space where we all could talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So what does this mean for us? And so that's what the Substack newsletter is about, where we can have conversations with each other about what this means.
Yeah.
That's why when I have these titles like Ukrainians, Trump just revoked Ukrainians' white card. Ultimately, I'm talking about the question of how do we become better human beings to each other, as opposed to looking at these things as singular battles on our own, and we end up losing the battle when we need to come together so we can win the
Yeah.
war.
Man, Terrell J. Starr. Jermaine, that's what his mama calling.
Hey, Michael Jackson's brother. Really, that's what she said.
Terrell,
Michael Jackson's brother.
Terrell Jermaine Starr, we love you. We appreciate you. We want to support you. You know, you are welcome here at any time. I hadn't planned to do anything today except for catch up on the million things I already need to post. But when I
Right.
saw what was happening, and when you said, I'm stuck on this train right now, but I can get with you tomorrow, I'm like, what time? Let's go.
Oh, that was the most uncomfortable train ride I had in my life. And so it was 16 hours, and I was at the top bunk, and the train is configured with 3 bunks on one side, and the grandma and her grandson already had the bottom 2, and I was stuck at the top. And so literally I was in the dark. It was hell. So no,
I'm glad you
I'll
made
talk.
it.
Uh,
And I'm glad
I'm good now.
you're safe, and stay safe. And if you need anything at any time for any reason, you know, I'm a bat phone call away.
Oh, I'm gonna reach out to you. I'm gonna need your help to help push out this series I'm doing. So we're gonna be in touch.
All right. Thank you. I'll
Yeah.
just keep talking to everybody for a minute. Take care. I hope you all learned a whole bunch of things. I learned a whole bunch of things. I hope that he provided insights for you. Please follow Terrell J. Starr everywhere. And as he said, Black Diplomats Official. Oh, it's not supposed to be diplomatics. Let me fix that. It's Black Diplomats. Let me change that. Black Diplomats Official. Okay, I gave him a whole new name, Black Diplomatics. Um, Follow Black Diplomats official on YouTube and on Substack. And you know, guys, I have been thoughtful and prayerful about the way that I bring you information in this new normal that we are in, because everything does not matter. Everything is not news. Some of it is just hype. And we have always been here to try to make things make sense. This week has been kabonkers. And I am going to post the week in review. That's what I should have been working on to get it pushed out now. But I wanted to do this first so that I could catch Terrell while he was available. Terrell Jermaine. um, but that's going to come out and it will give you the highlights. But as always, I believe in you going to original sources. Unfortunately, one of the original sources is one that I've through the Biden administration, Biden Harris administrations. I told you, you can keep going there now. If you want to see these executive orders, the presidential orders, the news, go to whitehouse.gov whitehouse.gov/briefing hyphen room. When you go there, whitehouse.gov/briefing hyphen room, a news page will come up for the Trump administration, and it's got presidential actions, news and information, and they are posting these executive orders and public statements there. You need to know what's happening because it is happening to all of us. It's happening to us all. And we're going to be doing the best we can in some new ways and some ways that we always have. So please set your alerts. The full interview with independent journalist Terrell J. Starr will be on my YouTube channel, the Monique Presley channel over on YouTube, and I will post a few clips of it here. Same thing for Week in Review. It'll be over on YouTube and some clips posted here. So please subscribe there, set your alerts there. Thank you for everyone who showed your support. We appreciate you. If you would like to support the work that we're doing even further, you can support us on Cash App, Monique Presley TV. PayPal is Monique Presley TV. As I said, subscribe on YouTube, Monique Presley TV, Monique Presley channel now, not Monique Presley TV. And here, thank you for the badges. And the best way that you can support is by sharing something that you've learned. Hashtag make it make sense. Tag me, tag Terrell, or whoever I guess was for the day. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Enjoy your weekend. Weekend review coming soon. Bye-bye.